Welcome to the exchange. Our topic today is the American Solidarity Party. It's a new party that has emerged, and they're encouraging people to write in their candidates for the election of 2016, and they may get ballot access in some states. And I have with me here a couple people who are going to have a debate about this, because the American Solidarity Party, I can actually read you their stated aim here from their website. Their stated aim of the American Solidarity Party is that we seek to promote the common good and the material and spiritual welfare of all people, thereby raising consciousness of the Christian worldview. We don't seek to be a proselytizing party, but in a broken and increasingly callous, secularized world, we offer a positive vision, bringing communities together. So it's an explicitly sort of Christian-inspired party. They describe themselves as analogous to Christian democratic parties in Europe, and so it raises questions about what the nature of American politics is, and where this kind of party deserves support. So our resolution for this debate is resolved that the American Solidarity Party deserves a seat at the table in the American politics. Supporting the resolution is going to be Alex Johannigman. You want to introduce yourself, Alex?
Sure. My name is Alex. I live in Dallas, Texas. Studied mechanical engineering at Rice University and have a master's in theology at the University of Dallas. So I don't claim to be an expert on politics, but do find kind of the intersection of politics and religion to be really fascinating. And as Ben mentioned, I've recently discovered the American Solidarity Party, and I'm really excited to kind of see where the party goes and grows in the future.
All right. And in the negative, supporting the negative is going to be Christian Threlkill. Why don't you introduce yourself, Christian?
Hey, I'm Chris Threlkill. I just graduated from Southern Methodist University here in Dallas, Texas. I was a double major in political science and music, and my emphasis in political science was actually a religion in America and the way it affects American voting trends.
Great. So Alex is going to begin supporting the affirmative for the resolution. Each participant will have an opportunity for an opening statement and then a second statement. And so Chris will end us. All right, Alex, it's all you.
Great. First, I'd like to say that we're at a very interesting point in our country where a full 42% of Americans identify as independent in the most recent Gallup surveys, which is more than Democrats or Republicans on their own. So there are a whole lot of people who don't really see either major party as being a particularly good fit for their views. And even among those who do identify as Republicans or Democrats, there are a lot who are not happy with the kind of the direction of their party's platforms, not happy with the current candidates. For example, 21 million Democrats currently claim to be pro-life on the issue of abortion, even though their party is taking a more and more aggressively pro-abortion stance. So in an increasingly polarized nation with a lot of people not happy with the parties as they are, I think we benefit from a moderate and more centrist voice. We benefit from a voice expressing solidarity with all human lives, with both unborn children and their mothers, with black lives and blue lives, with immigrants and native-born citizens. I don't think that our political rhetoric really needs to always support one group and then demonize another. I think because of this, I've recently been drawn to the American Solidarity Party, mostly because I'm a huge fan and supporter of Catholic social teaching as a Catholic myself, and that's really the kind of framework for how the party has formed a lot of its platform. It identifies as Christian rather than specifically Catholic, so it's not just a particularly Catholic or even inherently exclusively Christian party, but at the core of Catholic social teaching is the belief that all human life has inherent dignity, that ought to be respected, that we ought to work towards the common good. Its principles look towards the good of the human person primarily, rather than focusing primarily on, say, what's best for the economy, what's best for personal freedom, reducing or increasing the size of government, which a lot of other political parties and platforms seem to focus on. And I think more than anything, what has really caught my attention about this party is that it upholds the equal dignity and sanctity of all human life through a consistent ethic of life that opposes and seeks to reduce, as far as possible, things like abortion, euthanasia, physician-assisted suicide, capital punishment, unjust warfare. It seeks to support socially and economically vulnerable members of society, such as the poor, single mothers, children, the disabled, ill, and the elderly. The platform expresses concern for common good, the environment, family life, education and virtue, civil society, racial and gender justice, national and international peace, religious freedom, subsidiarity, distributist style economic policy, and kind of above all, solidarity. And I think a lot of these viewpoints and policies you'll see in the Republicans or the Democrats, sometimes not in either. And so I really appreciate kind of the way they kind of all fit together within the party's platform. So that's kind of my brief introduction. There's so much more to talk about that you can research on your own, or I can get into later in the discussion.
All right, Chris.
All right. Well, I'm going to be making my argument against the inclusion of something like an American Solidarity Party within the American political system from more of a macro view. I'm going to be focusing more on the philosophical concepts and then a couple of legal hurdles that you'd have to face with a growing or a prominent American Solidarity Party. First off, I'm going to do a contrast in the way American religion has influenced politics versus what we find in Europe. America is unique compared to what we see in the rest of Christian society in that America has been heavily influenced by its faith, primarily the Christian faith, due primarily to its separation of church and state. De Tocqueville, and famously noted in Democracy in America, that what he found in the history of Europe is that when the church or of any sort tied itself to the state and it found itself tethered to the vicissitudes of the state, and by that it means if the state is going through a poor time, if say you're in a monarchic system and you're going to democracy, by the church being legitimized by the state, whenever the state has a good time, the church has a good time, but whenever the state has a bad time, the church has a bad time as well. When he interviewed the laity and religious of the 1800s in America, they all found that by being separated from the temporal powers of the state, the church had more significant influence in the social consciousness because it was perceived as being a religiously sacred, morally pure voice within the kind of social political context of the country. It was able to have a larger influence as a result of being stepped away from the state. Karl Barth, who's a noted political theologian, also notes that he makes the argument that the Christian church, whether it be Catholic or any denomination, is a sphere of influence which resides within a larger sphere of influence of the secular world. He noted that no church really argues for a just state, right? The Catholic Church doesn't say democracy or theocracy or monarchy. It specifically is the just state that is the kingdom of God. The closest that they ever really advocate for is some sort of idealized form of the state of nature. As a result, you can't really it's difficult to claim on a philosophical level that any one political party or form of government of any sort can be claimed as the true just state as envisioned by Christian social teaching. Moving on to a more legal level, the biggest hurdle any American Christian Democratic Party would have to deal with is the Lemon Test. Now, the Lemon Test is a statute upheld by the Supreme Court, and it states that basically any legislation must have a secular purpose, and the principal or primary effect of any statute is revolving anything religious is not to advance or inhibit religious practices and it must not result in an excessive government entanglement with religious affairs. I think the biggest problem that you'd find with an American Solidarity Party is, say they get into power, they get into Congress, they get into the executive branch. Any legislation that they put forward through their party, which is being explicitly influenced by Christian social teaching, is that they'll have to be legally challenged by the courts or by legislation via the Levin test. So, if you say you wanted to put forward legislation about environmental regulation via the American Solidarity Party, even though it might have a secular purpose, by its potential influence by Christian social teaching, you'd have any legislation immediately legally challenged. I think that presents a massive hindrance to any actual accomplishments an American Solidarity Party would get put forward. And then just based off of the historical nature of the influence of religion on American government, I find it hard to support an American Solidarity Party when it's been historically proven, when contrasted with Latin America and Europe, that the separation of church and state generally gives the voice of the church more power than it would when it's inherently tied to a political system.
All right, Alex, your second opportunity.
Yeah, I think Chris raised a lot of really good points that I think the American Solidarity Party, as it moves forward, needs to consider as it's forming its policies and potentially gaining influence within the government. But at the same time, I think those challenges are not unique to it, and I think are challenges that Christians within the existing Republican and Democratic parties already have to face. I mean, I think Republicans and Democrats alike those parties are full of Christians who claim that their faith has influenced their particular views. Obviously, those views are very different, and their particular experiences as Christians, the way that their faith has informed them, has taken very different paths. But it's still something that a great number of politicians consider to be influential on how their opinions were formed. And I agree with Chris in that anytime a particular policy is being considered or pushed forward, it really needs to have a secular rationale in addition to kind of the religious base that it may have. So, we're an American Solidarity Party to grow and influence and reach a point where it is guiding a lot of these national discussions on laws and policies within Congress or the executive branch. We would need to be mindful of what are kind of the secular reasons for the good of this policy, and something that the pro-life sort of worldview or pro-life perspective on abortion has had to kind of confront over the years is why is opposing abortion something that is good for all of society? You can't be pushing forward this sort of legislation just because God told you to, but it needs to be something that benefits a person for a rational secular viewpoint. And I think that's possible with the American Solidarity Party. I think it's possible to have a platform that is informed by your faith, yet still understood and kind of defended by more objective secular understandings. One thing that I really appreciate about Catholic social teaching is that it's really informed and guided by natural law, the law that kind of we see within the world around us, that kind of makes sense when we on a natural level. It's not just that we read the Bible and the Bible said something and therefore we're doing it, but that you can see that it makes sense and how we see it lived out. It makes sense to help the poor, to stand with a single mother, not just because God said so, but because there are actually benefits to society for that. And I think a lot of a majority, if not all, of the American Solidarity Party's platform can also be defended on a secular, rational, kind of more objective level. It's not just handed down from God above or from a particular church. it upholds itself in that context. And I think another point that Chris brought up is the problem within American society of a particular church having power in the political sphere, and a lot of the problems that has led to in Europe in the past and in certain parts of Latin America. And I think because the American solidarity is not tied to a particular church or a particular denomination, this is not something that's going to cause a huge problem. So far, a lot of the people I've met, in the American Solidarity Party, as I've gotten to know the rest of the party, there are a lot of Catholics, there are a lot of Orthodox Christians, there are a lot of Anglicans, even a number of Lutherans, evangelicals, and there's even space for people who are not Christians. I think there's a lot within the platform that is in common with groups like Secular Pro-Life, who oppose abortion, but also for the most part also oppose things like the death penalty or unjust wars. I think they would find a place within the party. But I do agree that Chris has a lot of helpful points and things that we really need to be aware of and consider as we're growing, to not be too overt in the Christian identity of the party, even though that is obviously a key informant in the policies and platforms.
Okay, and the last word to you, Chris.
Okay. Well, Alex just brought up an interesting point, which I'm kind of grappling with now. He would say he just said that if going forward, the American Solidarity Party would need to be careful not being too overt with the Christian part of Christian Democrat. At which point, I guess I have to question, what is the point of a Christian Democratic Party then, if you're going to worry about being too Christian? I'm also, just going back, I'm still concerned about the mixing of church and state in any way. Let's take the Christian Democratic parties in Europe, for instance. A common problem with the Christian Democratic parties in Europe in terms of getting their platform moved is that due to the parliamentarian system that is common in Europe, where you have multiple parties, not just two, you don't have a binary choice, you end up making coalitions in order to enact legislations and create legislative majorities. So Christian Democratic parties generally have to ally with left-leaning parties or right-leaning parties in order to create a coalition that gives them a governing majority. From there, they can advance their platform. They get the most say because they're probably the largest party in the coalition. At the same time, they have to make key concessions on their platform in order to appease the other parties that decide to join in under the coalition. They could be, like, for instance, in Germany, there's a couple of really conservative parties that are part of the Christian Democratic Coalition that are about ethnic homogeny and things like that. They have to make concessions about immigration, or and in order to get the legislation across and that generally goes against the teachings of Catholic social teaching in terms of mercy towards immigrants. Another way we can look at this is the way the Anglican Church is facing issues with legitimacy due to being tied to the state. A lot of the moral authority of the Anglican Church within Europe, if you look at polling, it's trended downward historically as time has gone on, specifically due to it being seen as an extension of government rather than a voice of religious authority. I'm concerned that an American Solidarity Party, again, while being influenced by Catholic social teaching and being put in a position of power, particularly going forward, even if it's working as a centrist party within the current American political system, I'm worried that it would lose the kind of clarity and moral authority it has with that Catholic social teaching as it gets put into positions of temporal power. I'm worried that people will come to be associated with the Solidarity Party as they have become with Democratic and Republican coalitions as we have them now, just due to the effect that whatever someone's put in power, they generally get critiqued far more than usual than they would if they were just a voice of philosophical authority. Then there's the other big concern I have is this, in that if we get a substantial Christian democratic style party in public sphere, that opens the floodgates for there being created a a Hindu solidarity party, a Buddhist solidarity party, a Pastafarian solidarity party, a Satanist solidarity party, in which you have the atomization of any substantial coalitions due to this concept of wanting to retain a sort of moral ideology within your party based off of religious grounds. You would, I feel, then, if you give a seat to the Christians in terms of politics, you've also got to be able to give a seat to the Jewish and the Islam and the Buddhist and the Hindu and the Zionists, right? And in doing so, you compromise the separation of church and state and the power of political faction. Um, a common problem that you have in Europe that you don't have in America due to the idea of us having temple parties rather than a bunch of coalition parties is that um, while you might be able to identify with a certain party based off your ideology, at the end of the day, you're still basically getting the equivalent of a Democratic Party or a Republican Party in Europe because of the coalitions you build. So, while you say you might be part of the, neo-Nazi party of Greece, or you're part of the far socialist party of Ukraine or something, right? You might get that sort of ideological satisfaction of being a member of that party, but none of the legislation you want really gets done because you're forming coalitions with these other parties and you're losing that sort of um, platform purity. I'm concerned that with an American Solidarity Party coming forward, you still wouldn't have a substantial majority in terms of it being a substantial third party that you already get in the Republicans and Democrats. By that I mean, at most you might get 15, 20, 30% of the country if you have three choices rather than two. Instead, you're still going to need to build a coalition with the Republicans and the Democrats to create a governing majority to get legislation put across, at which point I'm not sure that having this sort of separate party as a third voice in the discussion is actually going to get the kind of change a third party generally is seen as being able to enable within the current political system. And I think that voices most of my concerns with the rise of a major third Christian Democratic Party in the country.
All right. Thank you both for giving your thoughts. I hope this has been informative and starts a conversation. There's probably a lot more to say about all the different third parties that are popping up. It will be really interesting to see if a lot of people, the kinds of people that Alex mentioned who are sort of disillusioned with both parties, particularly this year, if they take Alex's direction and vote for the ASP or another third party. And it'll be interesting to see if the ASP is just sort of a flash in the pan or if it actually becomes a sort of broader, more long-term player in American politics. So let us know what you think. Let us know if you want to participate. Thanks, as always, for watching.